Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis,
And I'm Tanner Wayland.
and we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. My name is Tanner Wayland, and together we're going to learn about how to prepare great adventures for our players to love and enjoy. Today, let's jump into a short announcement. As always, we are trying to make opportunities for us to do one-shots with our listeners. In the past, we kind of did it month to month. We're actually going to be offering those, just as set times that you can sign up for, like months in advance. So if it hasn't worked for you in the past, check it out. I'll have the link in the show notes. But regardless, we look forward to playing with you. Now, in regards to today's topic, it's food. Now, you might be thinking, Tanner, food is a tangible thing. Tabletop role-playing games is theater of the mind. They shouldn't overlap. Au contraire, my friend. Something that players don't often think about is, food that both they bring to the session, and second, the food that actually shows up in your adventures. So I'm going to touch on both, because you've probably thought maybe a little bit about food. When people get together, you like to snack, you like to have bowls of pretzels or Cheetos or whatever else, right? Now, that's wonderful, and frankly, I encourage any DM out there to kind of create that kind of friendly environment where you feel like you're hanging out with your friends. And especially if you're doing longer sessions, like 3-4 hour sessions, then you know what? I would say food is almost a prerequisite for that, or at least to have a good time. Now, there's a couple caveats there. First off, not all snacks are great for a long-term game. And here's what I mean. During the day, when you're working or talking with people or even hanging out, you're typically not just chowing down on a bunch of greasy or salty or, super filling snacks. And that's good because it keeps you, in the moment, doesn't make you too full or feel just, bit of indigestion or anything like that. And I don't think that people, when they're trying to make D&D feel kind of like that chill hangout, you don't think about healthy snacks. And I'm not the first person to talk about this. There's a lot of people online who, have talked about, hey, if you're going to have food at your session, make sure it's healthier food, like veggies, nuts, things like that aren't going to really weigh you down. And I tend to agree with that. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't occasionally have, less healthy snacks, but, do it in measure as always. Now, a nice kind of middle ground there of taste and, and snackiness. I really think it's great if if the DM or a player brings a themed food item. Now, if we're in a fantasy setting, which often means a medieval setting, right? There are certain kinds of foods that fit into that better. That could be, you know, anything that's a little bit more natural. Now, it could be like stuffed mushrooms, right? When you hear mushrooms, I mean, doesn't that kind of sound like you just went out into the forest and went mushrooming? Or it could be, as simple as some hard-boiled eggs with salt and pepper, right? I used to have that all the time as a kid. Not as much recently, but when I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what? As I was researching medieval snacks and what they would have eaten, and it was like, oh, hard-boiled eggs, meat, tarts with like fruits or meats or cheeses or anything in there. I was like, this sounds great. Certainly less complicated than our current snacks, and maybe a little bit more complicated than you want to do for every session. But if you're doing a longer session and you're going to have food anyway, why not get into the mood by actually making time appropriate snacks? Now, and this is going to play into my point when I talk about food, like in the actual world that you're creating. If you are in a specific land or nation that is kind of based on a real world equivalent, like an equivalent to Egypt, for example. You could even kind of imitate Egyptian foods. Same for like Greece or China or anywhere that has that kind of deep history and very cultural foods, and that has an equivalent in your own world. I think you're losing out if you're not bringing that into your game and outside of your game by being like, hey, we are in a very Asian setting. Let's have some, I made some dumplings. It's my first try. Hope you enjoy them. Of course, they're dumplings. They're really hard to not like, unless, of course, you just mismeasured the proportions. Now, are they going to look great? I think if anyone's actually tried, closing a dumpling, that's not always true, but the taste, you can get past the looks and enjoy the taste. So anyway, I'm rambling. My main point is, don't slouch on being proactive in how you bring food into the gaming situation that you have at your sessions. Don't always just default to easy snacks that are super, unhealthy is maybe the word that I want to shy away from, but just snacks that aren't supernatural or are heavily processed, because those can kind of weigh you down after 2 or 3 hours of just snacking on them. And for you as a DM, I would say, it is kind of a sad matter of fact. You can't always be eating as much as the players because you're kind of on deck at all times. And that's, something you just have to deal with. Now, it's not to say that you can't eat. I know some DMs out there have a strong feeling about that. I say just, pick your times when you do eat, right? Now, a great time is during battle. If you're having an encounter with with the players and the monsters, then that is a perfect time to, while the players are speaking out the action and people are rolling, grab a chip or a carrot or whatever you have out there, and use those opportunities. And then when people are having conversations amongst themselves, like I often encourage you to do, at the campfire or in break times, after combats or anything like that, use that time as well. You aren't always as required to speak as you think you are. And if you just kind of become aware of those moments, then you can eat without actually, making the players kind of lose immersion by breaking up your riveting conversation with the lord of a city because the lord is just snacking. Although, and this is kind of the caveat that I just remembered, if you have the NPC actually eating as they're talking with the players, kind of like Denethor in Lord of the Rings, when he's like eating the tomatoes, and that, we all know the scene, right? You could recreate that using food, and I think your players would just get a kick out of it. I know I would. And I've now put that on my DM bucket list in the next little bit. But going beyond that, let's talk about food in actual campaigns. So I think a lot of players don't think when they sign up to, play with you as their DM, they're thinking about their characters. They're thinking about the stats, how to min-max or any kind of cool story ideas they have. I doubt any of them, and probably you too, are thinking about food. And frankly, I think that that's a missed opportunity. When we're talking about immersion, the senses play such a role, right? And I know that we mostly talk about visuals when we're describing things, but why not make your characters' interactions and your characters' personalities more real by actually having food play a role in that? Here's a great way to do it. First off, during session 0, or at least when you're talking with each player about what they need to prepare going into a new campaign, or just into creating a new character because their old one died, I would add a couple questions kind of to get the player into the character's head and give them more opportunity for interaction with the world. And those questions are, first, what is your character's favorite food and why? And you could even give them an example of like, hey, one of my past characters, their favorite food was just a simple slice of bread and some of the soft cheese that their mother prepared from the goats that they had in their backyard. And then that's like it tells a lot about them. It shows that, they grew up on a farm, that, their mother played a big role in their lives, and also that they're not all into that fancy stuff, right? But you don't even have to give that example. If you just ask the player, I think a lot of players are very creative. If you ask, what is your favorite, your character's favorite meal and why, you'll get some interesting backstory that you wouldn't just if you were asking like, hey, what's their deal? It asks them to get specific, but specific about something that is really an interesting prompt. And then the next question, aside from, favorite food and why, their least favorite food. And you don't have to ask why for this, right? Because oftentimes it's just that they don't like the taste. But I would ask that question because it gives you a lot of interesting and funny experiences. Think about it. Your players get invited to go dine with the king or with a witch out in the forest. And suddenly, the witch is like, oh, I've got these boiled squirrels. And the player's like, oh my goodness, I hate boiled meats. Or maybe it's something more like, oh, stewed cabbage, right? That's something that when I was young, I hated. And so if that's something that your player's been like, oh, this is what my character hates, then whatever it is, find an opportunity during an important meeting and slip that in as one of the things that gets served, and then ask for that character's reaction and put that into the conversation. Because frankly, a lot of conversations with NPCs are just so focused on, the task at hand, exposition. And you know what would really mix that up? If while the NPC is, discussing about, oh my goodness, we've had so many kidnappings because of, the orcs in the area, if the player is just gagging because they had some fish placed right in front of them that still had its head, right? Because that's something that they don't like. They don't like seafood. Just think about how much fun and realism that adds to a normal, it could have been boring conversation. So if you find out what the player, getting back to kind of those questions to ask during character creation, if you find out what the character loves to eat, what they hate to eat, and also when they cook for themselves, what they like to cook, that actually kind of gives you a basis for, adding that kind of taste sense to the world around them, right? If they're really handy at cooking, then you could actually play a role into that and be like, hey, you guys are bedding down for the night. What are you guys eating? Okay, who's cooking? What are you cooking? And then let a player describe that. And I tell you, you might not want to do it all the time, but if you do it occasionally, then the players are going to have fun with it. They're going to have fun with like explaining what they got in town, or maybe what they hunted and how they prepare it. And if the if the character is really rudimentary in their cooking skills, then it could be as simple as like, well, I have some bread, so I cut some slices and give it to everyone. And that could be like an interesting way for the characters to interact as well, where the one character is like, oh, stale bread again today, you know? I think that you have a lot of opportunities there. And I guess one reason why I'm bringing up and really pushing for this is I don't know if you've ever read a book that has really just captivated one of your senses in a special way. I have an example. So I don't know if you ever read the book series Aragon. When I was a kid, that was coming out, or like a young teen, I guess. And in the second book, which I think was called Eldest, it had the red cover with the red dragon on it. At one point, they're going through the mountains, and and in those mountains, they have a dwarf city that they go to, and it described this big boar that was roasted, and that, you know, and they described it really well with like the sauce and everything like that. But you know, it still used some filler words like, oh, it was such a spicy thing, as in, you know, that's kind of the expected description that you get in a lot of books, which is like, oh, it was so spicy, because they don't know how to describe the different kinds of spices. But this book, it went beyond that, and it also described all these mushroom dishes. And I got to tell you, I didn't like mushrooms at the time that I was reading that book. And that book made me want to eat it, right? It was describing all these different types of mushrooms, some big, some small, the ways that it was sliced, how it looked, the texture, and it just really transported me and my imagination, and it made me want to try a really good mushroom. And I have since then, and I really enjoy mushrooms now. But I think that you can create that experience for your players, frankly. And I think that, you know, we talk about when your characters enter a certain scene, you know, it could be a pauper's home or a huge vista with crystals jutting out of it. And we talk about how you should prepare, you know, specific paragraphs of description that draw the characters in. I think that you could also benefit from like preparing paragraphs of description for something as simple as, you know, a meal that your characters have with a local NPC, right? A lot of the best conversations that I've had in my life have been around meals. It hasn't been me just entering a house and just randomly talking to a person, right? And so I think that if you put in that time, you know, and maybe even imitate it a little bit in terms of, you know, preparing some kind of small meal or small, you know, food for the real life players to eat while you're doing this food scene, I think that you can really step up the immersion to a whole nother level, right? Really try and reproduce the experience of eating and bonding or disagreeing over a meal with your players. I think that they will only be, you know, impressed. They might be confused because, like I said at the start, not everyone thinks about food. In fact, most people don't think about food when they think about adventures like that. But I think it's something that that really doesn't need to take too much effort on your part. Just writing just a few different sentences about how the broccoli was, you know, too mushy because it had been overcooked, and it wasn't salted. Or on the other hand, that the broccoli that they were served was perfectly steamed within a basket, and the person had poured oil and salt and what looked like some very finely minced garlic over it. And if you just give that kind of description, then I think players will really get drawn in. They also might get hungry So warning, you might not want to do this if you guys just don't snack at all, because then, you're just torturing your players. But for the rest of us who are trying to make it a little bit more of a party where you're snacking, then I would say definitely find opportunities to incorporate food into your gaming in a smarter and a more purposeful way. I think that it's really going to step up your storytelling to the next level, because it's going to get you into the more nitty-gritty, intricate aspects of what living is like, right? So I've talked your ear off enough about food. Go get some food for yourself, and until next time, let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
Shoot one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.